It's 10 times harder to be optimistic than it is to be pessimistic.
Yeah.
So you have to work at it. And if you work at it long enough, it's like shyness. If you fake not being shy over a period of time, guess what? You stop being shy. So you fake it till you make it.
Welcome to the Let Me Save You 25 Years podcast. I am your host, Shawn David Nelson, founder of Lovesack, that dude. So excited to dive in with a multi-billion-dollar successful entrepreneur today discussing manifesting, making things happen with our words and our minds. Like, you can write it off. You can say it's a bunch of hoo-ha. You can, whatever, think it's silly. But I don't think I've interviewed someone on this podcast that didn't do some form of it. And there are many forms, there are many ways, but it all comes back to the same basic principles. We're going to get into it deeply today with Jim. I can tell you that, listen, when I go back to my PowerPoint presentations from like 2016, every goal that I ever set for Lovesack roughly a decade ago and had put it on paper, told people about it, has happened. Some of them a little later than planned, some of them earlier. But if you can speak it, if you can believe it, if you can write it down, there is a cosmic connection between the mind and the hand, between the mouth and the universe, that makes things happen. You can believe it or not, but we're going to get into it and prove, hopefully, to you with one of the most successful people I've had on this podcast, Jim McCann of 1-800-Flowers. We talk about the importance of owning your vocabulary, the power of words, writing the waves of change, being observant of the waves of change happening in the world. There's a big one upon us right now. As things change rapidly, being able to focus on controlling what you can control instead of being wiped out by forces beyond your control. When it comes to manifesting your dreams, being very deliberate about writing them out, speaking them out in some detail in order to make them happen. Finally, evolving by design instead of just by default. A few books I'll drop on you that have been very useful to me in the realm of manifestation, making things happen. The original, Psycho Cybernetics, Maxwell Maltz, my favorite. 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, which we'll talk about in this podcast. Lodestar, Lode Star, by our guest today, Jim McCann. Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Kahneman. Primal Leadership by Goleman, who I love, the author the author of Emotional Intelligence, the whole idea of it. And lastly, a classic, Think and Grow Rich, Og Mandino. So dated, so goofy and old, but awesome. These are all some of my favorite works on the topic. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jim McCann, Manifest. Today, we have someone who is living proof that what you say, believe, and build can quite literally bloom into something extraordinary. He started with a single flower shop in Queens and turned it into a global powerhouse that became one of the first ever e-commerce giants. He's not just the founder and chairman of 1-800-Flowers. He is a pioneer of digital retail, a master of meaningful connections, and a firm believer in the power of planting seeds, not just in business, but in life. This man knows that visualizing your goals, declaring them boldly, and believing in your path isn't just motivational fluff. It is the blueprint for building something very real. Please welcome to the show, the one and only Jim McCann.
Hey, Shawn. Thanks for that nice introduction.
Of course. So Jim, I have to ask, without thinking too hard, when you first heard this Shawnism, just manifest, what's the first thing that came to mind for you?
The first thing that came to my mind when I heard that is it's something that I get to talk about quite a bit. That is, people always ask, because I've been around a long time and the company's been around a long time and continuing to play an important role in a lot of people's lives. People ask, well, did you ever imagine that it would become a big thing? And the answer is yes. Uh, I knew instinctively that whatever I was going to be involved in, I would try and grow. Whether it was in a family contracting business, painting contractors, uh, being involved in that as a young kid, always looking at how do we grow this business. I worked in a men's and boys clothing store as a kid, part-time in high school and college and even beyond, and always saying, how can we grow that business? My first career was in social services. I ran a home for teenage boys, and knowing how big the need was, we were always thinking, how do we grow that business? So when I got into the flower business by buying that first shop, I was in Queens, but it was in Manhattan. Uh, the first thought was, how do I build this into a business? Yes, I'd become a florist along the way, Shawn, but always thought of how do we grow this business? And the answer, well, we didn't have the answer then. We thought we did, but we had to change our path a few times. Uh, but it was always about how do we grow something big. So yes, I always imagined we'd grow a bigger business. It's not as big as I'd like it to be yet. And I know we're still on a journey of growing, and the way we grow is going to be different this time than it was any of the other 5 or 6 or 7 big changes that we've made in our business. So yes, I think it's a genetic defect that whatever we're involved in, we're going to try and grow, whether it's a not-for-profit, for-profits. Growth is the great elixir. So yes, I did imagine it. Yes, it's not yet what I imagined.
I love that. I love that you were still trucking. If I did my research right, you opened your first flower shop the year I was born.
76.
Yeah, 1976. In fact, my team was looking at a piece of nostalgic love sack signage that we have hanging in our office there in Stamford the other day. And in the early days, this is in the late 90s when I got started actually in business, on our sort of logo seal, we had love sack, conceived 1976 to try and give it that air of like nostalgia and like credibility, because we were like obviously a startup. But you had it. So, and I love hearing from you. It's not yet as big as I'd like it to be.
Well, don't forget, Shawn, as we evolve in business, there are big macro influences that change a lot of things for us. In the flower business, I don't know if you've noticed there in Salt Lake City, but the number of flower shops has gone down dramatically. And they can't really afford to be in good retail locations because so much of the work that we do in a flower shop is backroom kind of stuff. The receiving of your flower product, the cleaning, preparing, hydrating that product, making up the designs for symphony arrangements and birthday bouquets at all, and then getting it on trucks and getting it out to where it needs to go. And then you have the fact that, for example, little things like in New York City, we were one of the first flower shops to put a display outside a shop of bouquets. So when people were walking home from work, we were in a Upper East Side of Manhattan, which was a residential area. So people would be walking home from work past our shop. And if they saw a bouquet they could buy it. Well, they changed the laws in New York City, and florists were not allowed to do that. But the only stores that were allowed to do it were the grocery stores.
Yeah.
And so they took over the cash and carry bouquet business by law. So the unintended consequences are we would get a fine if we put that material out, but
why is that? What was behind
fruit and
that
vegetable stands were allowed to merchandise their sidewalk. They had a better lobby than the florists did. Florists didn't have a lobby.
That makes no sense.
But it makes no sense, but those things do impact your business. So we sort of had to give up the cash and carry business because we were legislated out of it. And then, of course, supermarkets all began way long ago carrying flowers. And so little by little, we were legislated or competed out of the cash and carry business. So it changes the nature of our locations, where we locate our shops, how much we devote to the back room and heavy refrigeration and proper care and handling of our product. So big influences change us that we don't control.
Yeah, that's who could have guessed Of course, when you say it, it sounds like New York, but
or any
I
other major city.
yeah, yeah.
And then you had things come along like 800 numbers, which were back in 1986. You were 10 years old. That was a big deal. That
Yeah,
people discovered this whole new idea and the mnemonics that we were the first company whose name was its telephone number. So it changed. It changed our world. So that was the next big wave for us after retail stores. And one of the things I thought about in anticipating our conversation, Shawn, was, and I see it in your world, and you already mentioned a couple examples of it. Owning your vocabulary is really, really important.
mm,
And saying that Lovesac was conceived in 1976 and having a wall of all your nostalgic from the early days, all of that says something about you, what you value, your culture, and whether by accident or design, it's important for each of us to control our vocabulary in our families,
yeah,
in our businesses, in our communities, in our religious organizations. Vocabulary matters. So for us, an example of owning our vocabulary is the fact that we talk about the different waves. In a wave, here we are proximate to the Atlantic Ocean, where there's certainly waves. Uh, the waves of change that influenced us was the birthing of 800 numbers as a product of legislation once again. That is, up until that time, the mid 80s, the telephone numbers were deemed to be the property of the phone company.
hmm
Legislation at the federal level changed that and said, no, the phone number is owned by the customer. And then they introduced in that legislation what they call portability.
yeah,
So you could, if you own the number, you can take it to your carrier. So when they were breaking up the AT&T monopoly, the telco monopoly, it gave rise to WorldCom and MCI and Sprint et al. And now they were fighting with us, the customer, for us to bring our number, our 800 number, in this case, 1-800-Flowers, to the different carriers. And they appeal to you based on reliability, uh, technology, proficiency of their network, or features that they could offer you. And so that was a wave that was caused by legislation once again
yeah,
that changed us to adopt the 800 number as our primary access modality. But although we've changed, Shawn, over the years to different waves, the next wave after 800 numbers was this thing called the internet, first called the online world. That changes too. So we were just always changing, but changing in response to changes around us. So we never gave up any of the channels. We still have stores. We still answer the 800 number every day, many, many, many times a day. Uh, but we do add new channels based on technology and legislative changes. So we're adapting and morphing, but it's due to the changes. And of course, the wave that's hitting our shores today is the scariest and most exciting at the same time, which is the age of everything AI.
yeah. Well, I love your example of just rolling with it and controlling what you can control. I can't imagine the frustration of being, as a flower business, being legislated out of displaying flowers. I would lose my mind, want to stab my eyes out, punch at the wind. And, you clearly were able to just roll with it. And I think that that's a first principle. If you want to survive in business, is you have to focus on what you can control. You obviously, I mean, maybe you lobbied, maybe you fought it, but you obviously found a way to kind of shuck and jive and roll with it. And if I did my reading right, when you bought that first flower shop, you bought with it the 1-800 number. Is that accurate? They somehow had that.
No, we started in the flower business. We named the shop that we opened we called it Flora Plenty, and I had it was my intention from the get go is to try and build a business. So I didn't leave my job at St. John's Home for Boys, where I was now in the administration. So it wasn't a 24/7 job like it was when I lived in the group homes.
hmm
So I hired a buddy of mine who knew a lot about plants, and he was a good guy. So I hired him to run that shop, because 6 months later we opened up a second shop, and then a third shop, and a fourth shop. So every 6 months and every 3 months, until we realized 10 years later was when we bought the 800
Okay.
number
Okay.
and changed our business. So it was 10 years of grinding it out, opening shops, realizing what a mistake we made because there was no economy of scale in operating
Yeah.
dozens of flower shops. It just made everything more complicated and less efficient.
You and I learned the same lesson, you know, a couple decades apart, in the sense that Lovesac began really, I mean, you know, I made these in college for friends. We opened a factory, but really we got started by opening our first retail store. And then we immediately went out and opened more, maybe a lot like you, waking up, I don't know, a few dozen shops into it. We were also franchising at the time, to realize much later, as we watched these revolutions. So let's go there. Lovesac had the opportunity to rebirth itself on the wave of the direct consumer movement that was happening in the mid-teens. You know, as we were observing even what Tesla was doing in malls, then you saw Casper and Warby Parker and all these brands. What's funny is they were really just selling stuff. Okay. We call it direct consumer. We can call it some fancy wrapper. But it gave us the chance to rethink of those retail outlets as showrooms for the web that was really our national and international reach. And for you've ridden now a few revolutions, right? Like you've ridden the 1-800 revolution. You've ridden obviously the .com. You were very early. We'll dig into that. And this AI thing that's happening for you and I that have seen a few waves, this absolutely is another wave just like that. So I appreciate you calling it out. But before we get into all that, because I think there's a lot of really useful tactical opportunities that we should tease out for those listening. But I want to come back to something fundamental you said, lest we lose it. You know, you made the point about owning your vocabulary. So let's go to like first principles for a moment, because this topic of manifesting is, in my mind, a first principle to a successful existence on earth. Whether people choose to do it overtly, or whether it happens instinctively, or whether they leave their whole life to chance, I still believe it's a true principle. And in fact, you're tapping into something that's eternal, which makes it true. Again, from my point of view, right? Like as a person of faith, in the beginning was the Word. And by the Word, you know, this universe was created. And we can take that as a pretty poem or metaphor. I believe that there is truth in that statement. And for anyone like you who have made remarkable things happen in their life, I believe that without even knowing that you've had those experiences where, you know, things that you have said or said repeatedly, or, you know, whichever way you want to come at it, whatever tactic you want to use to manifest, words are extremely powerful. Trademarks are extremely powerful. Statements are extremely powerful. And whether to the public or whether to ourselves, you know, like you called out, Lovesac's conceived 1976. It was kind of funny. It was kind of tongue in cheek. It was building off of other tactics that we had seen, but it also had power. You know, I think it gave us a point of view that extended both backward and forward from the beginning, like as if we had been here for 20 years, as if we're going to be here for another 20. And lo and behold, you know, from the specialty retail revolution, one wave that we lived through in the early 2000s, to the internet revolution, which we also lived through a little bit differently than you did, but we sucked all the air out of these 8-foot beanbags, making them shippable, which made us internetable, to this direct consumer movement, which was this last wave, to where we are today. I think a lot of people, if you could rewind to 2001 when we had one location, or by the way, put it somewhere in the middle, 2010 when we had a few dozen, I don't think you would think that in 2025, Lovesac would be one of the last ones standing, by the way, of that direct consumer movement. A lot of them are on their way out or done because they never got profitable. And you have little Lovesac, Lovesac, right? This giant beanbag company that's pivoted and found its way to survive a lot like you have. And so I just think, talk to me about a little more about vocabulary, about words, how you utilize them, whether tactically in business or whether personally in the context of making things happen in this world.
Well, listening to your journey, Shawn, I'm just thinking about this past weekend because it's not just in business, it's in family,
Mm-hmm.
it's in community,
Yep.
it's in everything we do. Being deliberate matters. And just think in our own individual spaces, think about you back in your college days. When you talk about manifesting, I had well, I had occasion a few years ago, 4 years ago now, no, almost 5 years ago, of reading an article in Psychology Today at the very beginning of the COVID lockdown. And I read it and I said, this fellow, this brilliant psychologist, really guessed right about how he thought the COVID lockdowns would impact us from a relationship point of view.
Hmm.
Our family relationships, that we weren't going to be near, even micro relationships like the uh, familiar barista where you pick up your coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
The knowing wave or the glance or the hey, how are you? How those things going missing would really change our lives. And so I wrote him a fan letter. I said, I don't know you, but I read this. I think it's brilliant. I made it a part of our vocabulary around the shop here. We've all read
Hmm.
it. And I think it's terrific. I hope we have occasion to speak someday. And he wrote back to me. He said, well, I certainly know who you are, and I'd love to speak to you. I'm not sure why you want to, but why don't we make it happen? And we did. And fast forward 5 years, I've gotten to know Professor Dr. George Everly really well. He's become a good friend.
Hmm.
We don't see one another in person as much as I'd like. He lives in Baltimore. I live here in New York. But we talk all the time. We communicate right all the time. And 3 years ago, he suggested to me, I invited him to work on what we call our celebrations council because I started a newsletter to our community at the very beginning of COVID, Shawn, because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't think we could send out an email saying, buy our flowers. If you're locked down, we have the right. Couldn't do that. So a young lady who was my chief of staff at the time, now a big shot in our marketing team, said to me, why don't you just write what you're telling us about what we're going through and how this is impacting us and how you think it's going to impact our customers' relationships. So I started to write that newsletter, and I did that 5 years ago, and it's sort of taken off on us.
Huh.
And I write it every Sunday, and we never try and sell anything in it. I just write mostly about relationships, mostly about the things we're talking about in terms of family relationships, not so much business, but family and community relationships. And I'd call on George and a half a dozen other wonderful people who I recruited to the circle of the Celebrations Connectivity Council because they were the experts. And people were writing to me, asking me questions I wasn't qualified to answer.
Hmm.
And George was the first I invited, and he was a terrific addition. And we were working on some really interesting things together. And finally, he calls me and said, Jim, I'm loving the work we're doing together, and I know you love it too. I have a suggestion. I said, what's that, George? He said, why don't we write a book together? So indeed we did. We wrote a book called Lodestar, which came out about 9 months ago now. And the process was the neat thing about it, Shawn. Working with this brilliant man, 5 graduate degrees, a couple of PhDs, taught at Harvard and Johns Hopkins for 40 years.
Hmm.
And he's such a remarkable man. And like I say, one of the gifts in my life is that he's become a very good friend. And he's all about, if you just look at his personal story, he's all about what you're about, which is manifestation. When he was a junior in high school, the guidance counselor asked his dad in rural Maryland, where they lived, to come by and visit him, wherein he told his father, the guidance counselor told George's father that George didn't have it. He was not likely to, he certainly wasn't going to go to college. Maybe he'd graduate from high school, but maybe just barely. Why don't you see if you can find him a job in a factory or a filling station or a warehouse where he'd have a chance, maybe get out a little ahead of his classmates because he doesn't have it. His father told him that story at lunch the day they celebrated George's first PhD.
Hmm.
And George asked his father, he said, Dad, why did you wait all these years to tell me that? And George's father said to him, because I didn't want it to become self-fulfilling.
Hmm.
And George figured out between his junior year in high school and talking his way into college he got properly diagnosed as severely dyslexic. He can't read.
Wow.
And a severe case of ADHD as well. But George was able to finally get properly diagnosed and rewire his own brain by realizing there's something called neuroplasticity. And as you often say, and I now firmly believe, your brain is adapting and changing all the time. So whatever you do regularly, your brain gets better at doing it. So if you spend a lot of time worrying, guess what?
Yeah.
Your brain gets better at worrying.
Wow.
If you're an anxious person, you get better and quicker to be anxious, better at being quicker to get to anxiety. And George figured that out and started to work on his own capabilities to teach him how to overcome his dyslexia and his inability to read. By the way, the book I wrote with George, Lodestar, was his 29th book. So, so I learned from him the vocabulary that I've been instinctually trying to manifest, which is we can change who we are and what we are and how we think. And working with George, we saw the research that said 80% of us are born pessimistic. Only 20% are born like you, Shawn, optimistic. But we can change how we think. We can teach ourselves to be more optimistic. We can teach ourselves to say, I'm in a jam here. I can figure it out. Let me write this down. Let me develop a plan, and we can get out of this. But that's something you have to train yourself to do, or work in environments where your training comes naturally, military at all. So working with George is a gift because I learned the theory behind some things I did in practice. I read and learned from him the science of neuroplasticity, self-fulfilling prophecy, optimism versus pessimism. Look at the people in your world, Shawn, who are pessimistic. They're less healthy. They have fewer friends. They have significantly less success in their marital situations. They're not nearly as happy. They're not nearly as healthy, measurably physically healthy. So why wouldn't you want to be optimistic and train yourself to be so if you weren't lucky enough to be born optimistic? Because you're going to have more and better relationships, more and better marital situations, more success, better health, more friends. People want to be around you. And so the 80% of us who are born pessimistic, the good news is we can learn to be optimistic, but it takes deliberateness and work. And part of that is controlling your own vocabulary.
Yeah, that's huge. So how can someone listening do that? What kind of tips and tricks do you have for someone to better control their own vocabulary and become more optimistic and more perhaps capable of manifesting good outcomes? Because language, spoken, written, thought, it all matters. I think we can agree on that.
It does. Well, first and foremost, I'd recommend buying a book called Lodestar.
Yeah,
you get to see the 10 pillars of a good and healthy life that we went through all the literature on, and there's so many good things out there.
I'm doing it now.
Do you know there are 85,000 books in print on self-help, self-development? I had no idea. It's a $10 billion a year industry. I had no idea. But there's a lot of good out there. And so working for 2.5 years on this project of writing this with George was a wonderful personal exercise for me. And I'd suggest for you, whoever you are, who want to better manage and have a better life. And that is, there's so many good things you could read that help you out there. Lodestar is just one of them. Lodestar we sort of wrote as a primer. We especially focused on graduates, particularly college graduates, high school, but college too. And we figured, here's something you should give as a gift, or you should get for yourself when you graduate, because you're starting on a new path in life. And you may think you're done with learning, but you're not. You're only beginning. You've learned how to learn. And so I'm a believer in lifelong learning. And I think most people are. But again, being deliberate. So the way you can learn to map your own behavior in your mind is to read really good quality stuff. And we cited, I think, about 120 books that we thought were terrific that you should read and learn from in our book, Lodestar. So I think there's so many good teachers out there who will teach you principles of, and I do it every day in my own life. Okay, I'm going down this path. What do I need to do? Let me refer to my own notes about how to change my thinking to get to a better place. And waves, the vocabulary I've been using to describe to you the changes we've gone through business, was one of those attempts on my brother and my part to give definition to people here that we've been through big change before. And we're always looking for what's the legislation or the technology that's going to change our environment. Let's be aware of it. Let's look for outside help to give it definition. Let's look to the experts in those technologies to give us an insight into where that's likely to go. Let's determine a point of view and let's act on it. And so, knowing that that's coming, that change is coming, let's prepare ourselves to embrace that change. So, using the vocabulary of waves, and now naming this sixth wave for us here at Flowers, the Flowers companies, naming it the Celebrations Wave, is part of that attempt to own the vocabulary. So yes, we say there are lots of people who are going to be threatened by AI. And when I say AI, I think of it having two big impacts on us personally and professionally. The one big impact is the obvious that we see and understand naturally, which is efficiencies. We're not going to need as many people in our accounting function tomorrow as we do today. We're not going to need as many people in our lawyer, in our legal department, or in our technology team. Every company now is going to get by with fewer people. That has a consequence. So it's efficiency that's easy to predict and see. But then there's an even more exciting part, which is the capability side of AI. We'll be able to create tools that help our community members have more and better relationships. We already have tools in place that can help them to express themselves. We now have a greeting card product that they can send digitally for free. They can design, you can go into a Walgreens drugstore and wade through racks of cards that were written to not say anything to anybody really personally. Or now you can design your own card and we can digitally deliver it for free. Or you might want to have a proper card printed, an envelope addressed, a stamp affixed, and put in to the postal system, very proximate to where it's going, so it gets there very quickly. And that costs you $5.99. But you can also design the image that goes on the front of the card using AI tools. You could do what I did at Mother's Day and say my wife likes to cook. She likes to garden. She loves spending time with her grandkids. She loves teaching her grandkids how to bake. I saw it happen this weekend. And once in a while, I can convince her to sit down with me and have a nice glass of wine. So I told that to our AI tool in our celebrations cards program, and it spit out. It asked me, "Do I want a limerick? Did I want a poem? Did I want a sonnet?" And so I said, "Like a poem." And I saw my wife on Mother's Day, knowing that I don't have a personal and emotional side to me at all, maybe a little. And I saw her get emotional when she read the card because it did such a wonderful job of taking my crude answers to its questions and composing it into a really nice and thoughtful, personalized message. So I think we're going to have an influence on what the greeting card industry looks like in the years ahead. And that has a great bearing on even my wife can get touched by the fact that I used an AI tool to express myself emotionally because I needed the help. Then there's hope for all of us out there that we can learn to better express ourselves. So when we talk about AI here, we say there are two things going on. One is efficiencies are coming, no question about it. The other is we can develop capabilities that make it easier and better for people to have more and better relationships. Now, on the efficiency side, one of the concerns we've had comes back to vocabulary, Shawn, is that we're going to have people around here going to be impacted by our deployment of AI tools. We have to. We can't put our head in the sand and say, we're not going to do that. We're not going to change because we're in a competitive environment. Other people are going to change. Other people are going to start by being AI native and not have to reduce their force. But as of 10 days ago, the Wall Street Journal reported that every one of the Fortune 500 companies now is saying their workforces have been reduced or are going to be reduced. Every one. And you have people like Peter Diamandis, who I like and respect a lot, talking about white-collar jobs being substantially wiped out within 5 years. Or you read reports just in the last week, again, about how the number of entry-level jobs is really drying up. I had the experience of doing my annual trip to, as I told you, driving through Stanford on the way to Yale a month or two ago and sitting down with 20 terrific MBA about to graduates. And last year when I did that class, I would say all of them had jobs. Many of them were going to work at McKinsey. I'd say more than half of the 20 that I meet with before the class of about 200, I guess. And I usually have lunch with them. This year, only 25% had jobs already, and several had spoken about job offers they had being rescinded. So that's a big, it's anecdotal, sure, but it's a big indication that change is coming. So what we've decided to do here at the Flowers Companies is be upfront with it with our team and say, this is coming. And you need to embrace this AI tool because, as my friend Seth Godin has said back last fall, if you as an individual in your job aren't working to figure out how you can use AI to do the parts of your job that it can do better and leave you free to do only what you as a human being can do, then be assured your boss is working on it and you may be the victim of rather than the architect of. And I think that was very wise, and I've passed his quote around our shop here a dozen times since then.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think it's good for everyone to hear. I think that's a great way to hold yourself accountable, right? If you're not doing the research on AI to decipher how you can do your job better, your boss is doing it for you. Your boss will do it for you. So take that as a sign. And, it's so easy in the sense that AI makes it easy to research AI. And
we have a new board member here at 1-800-Flowers. His name is Shelly Palmer. I'd encourage anyone who wants to understand what's happening in AI to go to his newsletter, his blog, which is a daily at shellypalmer.com, SHELLY, Palmer, PALMER. He's brilliant. I read him every day. And he told me 8 months ago over dinner, he said, here is a tool that comes without an operator's manual.
yeah.
And if you want to learn how to use ChatGPT, sit down and ask ChatGPT, how do I learn how to use you? And it's all about the prompt. How do I learn how to be a better prompter? And and he's right. It's amazing because, and I see it with my kids and my grandkids, the way they interact is so different than clunky old me tries to interact with it. But as you say, this is one, it'll tell you how to use it.
Yeah. Well, and what's, I think, poetic and ironic is it's all about language. It's so here you have the most, arguably, mankind's most powerful tool ever conceived. I think I'm still clumsy even speaking about it. I think the world is still clumsy even in understanding what the implications are fully. Yet at its core, it's language based. And I think that that's relevant to our conversation, right? Like this idea, it's so easy, like to your point about the tens of thousands of books written on self-help. It's so easy to dismiss it as and roll your eyes as, I don't know, another kind of silly thing that for people to assuage their own.
Yeah, I guess in the same sense that it's silly to go to a doctor to ask how you should better treat yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Well, I think it's perceived that way by people. It can be.
I'm sure it is. And I said there's a lot of good stuff out there. There's a lot of not so good stuff too.
Sure.
And that's why we tried to wade through and get to some core essentials. But I think you're right. It's all about our language, our vocabulary, and our deliberateness.
What do you do? Do you have any habits or daily, weekly, who knows, punctuated things that you do in your own life to continue to manifest good outcomes, keep yourself on track, manage your moods, daily temperaments, who knows what? Any little bits of wisdom that longtime, very successful person can offer people?
I started to say before, I was thinking about this weekend. For me personally, we had a family wedding. I have a niece who got married, and the whole family gathered, had a wonderful time on Saturday. And I find myself at this point in my life thinking more and more about nieces, nephews, kids, grandkids that we are lucky enough to have. And I'm so focused now on rituals. So in our newsletter that we write every Sunday, which is called Celebrations Pulse, we often write about rituals. And we were just working on some material that we'll finalize later this summer when we get closer to back to school time. And I said, we're always going to look at relationships. We're always going to look at rituals. And rituals are not just things that you've done forever. Rituals are things that you can start today.
Yeah.
And so I'm always conscious about what's beneath the surface in the ritual of going to buy your school supplies, or maybe buying some new clothes for back to school, and the conversations you have with the kids who are either going back to college or starting school. And I have grandkids, and the ritual of the kids standing there in front of the house with the first day of fifth grade.
Yeah.
Those little rituals, or the first report card that gets, and now with digital communications, those things instantly go around the family.
Yeah.
And so I find myself mostly thinking about what you mentioned it earlier on about when you started. I want my grandkids to know that when they're making a decision, they're at a party and they get to be a certain age and something inappropriate is introduced at the party. I want them to know that the decision they make is not just about who they are. It's about their family, their mother and father, their sister and brothers. It reflects on them. They're part of something bigger. They're part of the bigger McCann family. That is grandma, grandpa, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, nieces. They're part of that bigger. They're part of their school. They're not individuals isolated in a sea. They're parts of other communities. And so when every decision they make impacts their standing and what other people in those communities think about them, and it reflects on them. And I have a friend, her name is Ambassador Shabazz, who does a lot of work on that in school systems around the country. She has a big project going on in Newark, New Jersey now. And she espouses that theory to me all the time. These young people need to know they're part of something bigger. So my a heavy stream of thought for me all the time now is, what rites and rituals am I perpetuating, creating, and emphasizing with my kids and my grandkids?
I love that. It's interesting to hear you, this conversation. I mean, obviously we kicked it off around a topic, but I just want to call out for anyone listening how principle-based your thinking is, your life is. I know for me, obviously you or I could, I'm sure, give a masterclass of some kind on retail, on
mistakes you can make,
internet, on branding, on all sorts of things that we surely could talk about. But I think that you, like me, seem to want to put time and energy into the fundamental principles of not just life, but also your profession. So in your case, you have a company and multiple companies that celebrate, that are a part of rites and rituals. And I think it's very easy for people to just think of like a 1-800-Flowers or Harry and David's or whatever as another business, a business that's transacting on these, I don't know, events in a way that's profitable, in a way that generates income, or in a way that generates jobs. You can look at it any way you want. And all of that is good. I support all of that. I am a capitalist, as it sounds like you are as well. But I too believe, and it's funny because you wouldn't think this for Lovesac, and I don't have time to break it down for us today. But look, our ticker on Wall Street is LOVE, and we have a whole culture wrapped around that. And whether people realize it or not, your sofa, your sectional is in the nucleus, the very nucleus of your home. And I don't think it's ever been thought about by most people because it's just furniture and life goes on. But I have photos of my own children taking some of their first steps, holding on to sectionals pieces that I still own. I'm sitting on one. This one is 18 years old. It's older than my oldest daughter. And I'm super proud of that. And that's become our brand, is that we make stuff that can literally last a lifetime because it was built to last, designed to evolve. My point is, when you give a thing like a company a brand, the time to gestate, because you have to live through the years of just surviving. Like you had to open stores, you had to battle like legislation that wouldn't let you
Oh
sell
my
flowers.
God, it's payroll day again. How did that come around so fast?
Yeah, I mean payroll alone. I remember when our payroll hit $1 million, and I was like, how is that possible? Like every 2 weeks, I got to come up with $1 million. And then, by the way, it's gone way beyond that. And it's like, as a human on the earth, it's hard to fathom. But so you have to deal with that over here. But on the other side, if you can tap into the spiritual side, and I say that very broadly, if you can tap into first principles, if you can let the thing, the entity, find its place in the universe where it means something. And by the way, it was very hard for me in the beginning because I read all the books. I read the 21 Immutable Laws of Branding. I read all the self-help books. I read all these things that tell me to find purpose, promote the category, not the brand. And I was like, well, what's my category? Big bean bags. And it took me the better part of a couple decades to stumble into this design for life philosophy where we can make things built to last and designed to evolve and give ourselves meaning and wrap our culture around this purpose to inspire humankind to buy better stuff so they can buy less stuff. And by the way, all this rhetoric is coming from a company that makes stuff. So here I am very rapidly spewing a bunch of language at a listener to try and make the point that even a company as silly as Lovesac, given time, given observation, given the best books, given mentors, surrounding it with talent, can find its way into a very principle-based existence that really cracks the code to scaling and to resonating with the souls of humans in a way that they might not even understand when they're buying a couch or when they're ordering some flowers for their mom in a convenient way that made it easy, And by the way, I'm like a super user of 1-800-Flowers. I've used it my whole life. I've got all kinds of address in there. It saved my bacon so many times, and I never got the chance to get to know you. But it doesn't elude me for 1 second that when we do get the chance to sit down, to find that you are, although on the surface your business is a smooth way to order, chocolate covered strawberries, fill in the blank, it is much more than that. And that's, I believe that's the reason that you have scaled it far beyond what most florists could have ever conceived of. Maybe not what you conceived of, because like you said, from the beginning, you always wanted to grow. And we could spend a whole another hour talking about humans' desire for innovation, humans' desire for growth.
For social intimacy.
But I really love that you've wrapped your brand and your existence around that. And I think that's a key to your success. And that's my point to listeners but you have to give something the time. Like I doubt, and I could be wrong, tell me this, Jim, I doubt that you started and maybe even had it in the first few years, this point of view that might have been so deep as to your place in, I don't know, facilitating social intimacy, as you just said, or facilitating rites and rituals, as you just described.
Absolutely, you're correct. It's evolutionary. It's gone with age, maturity, some success, that you have the time and the bandwidth to think more broadly. I think these COVID 5 years have been a big influence on how we think about ourselves and our business. Great heroes and mentors along the way. I'm surprised you didn't mention in the things that you've read and thought about because of your geography, being there in Salt Lake. I bet the 7 Habits of Effective Leaders had a big impact on your life.
Which, by the way, is the core tenets of my religion, repackaged in a worldly manner.
Exactly. And his daughter, Cynthia Covey Haller, who worked with her father on the 7 Habits, wrote a book that had a profound impact on me a couple of years ago. Cynthia, also a resident of Salt Lake, she had been working with her dad before he passed on another book. And after he passed away, she decided to finish that work. And the book is called Living Life in Crescendo. I encourage you and any of your community to think about it, especially for people like me who are older. The title just screamed that I had to read this book. And I've gotten to know her a little bit now, and having had her on our podcast a couple of times. She's terrific. And the book said to me, I have friends who are retiring, or have been retired for a while, and they're wonderful people. But then I have other friends. I was with a group of my oldest friends, literally and figuratively, last week. And the common element among these wonderful men is that into their 80s, some into their 90s, and they're still at it. One of them is looking for his next big and exciting gig.
How cool is that?
And he's in his 90s. He just finished up. He created with Paul Newman the Hole in the Wall Gang, and they have millions of lives they've changed. And he just handed off leadership of that organization to somebody else. And he's saying to me, last Thursday night, I'm looking for my next big thing to sink my teeth into. And
I love it.
He's in his early 90s, and he's got dreams of going on. But Cynthia wrote about that. You can choose to live your life in diminuendo, dun 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 dun, or in crescendo, dun 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 dun. And her point is the whole idea of retirement is changing.
Well, the whole idea of retirement is a fraud. Like if you do the research, the word, as far as I've discovered, came from, the German, what's the right word? The aristocrats who wanted their father's positions, but they were still going and wouldn't, step aside. And so they created this, through their government mechanism, they created this mandatory retirement age as a thing. But the truth is, before modern civilization and aristocracies, people didn't get a chance to retire. Man, they were hunting and gathering or whatever they were doing till the end of their existence, and obviously training their kids up to help support them. But my current point of view is like, I don't want to ever retire. I mean, there are different paths. Like it seems like, based on your title, you have plenty of great management around you at 1-800-Flowers that allows you to focus on the things that you want to focus on, and probably have a lifestyle that's probably a little bit different than you had when you were in Queens, manning the till at the flower shop. And I've been there, and my own career has evolved.
Not only does it free me up, but it puts people in places who have different and better skills than I had for those jobs.
Me too. And that's my point, is like, it's not to say that your role in life, like your role now as I'll call it a patriarch in your family, with all these nieces and nephews and things like that, and you're trying to establish rites and rituals and things like that, is also something that's evolved. You didn't always have grandchildren to think about and whatnot. So our roles even professionally can evolve over time, and should. But I don't want to retire. And my saying that out loud is partially one of these tactics that I'm talking about. I employ lots of tactics to drive myself forward and have success. One of them is saying things out loud, because I then feel like a hypocrite. I hope that if I ever just, hang it up and start to golf a lot, I kind of feel like a hypocrite, because I've been sitting here on this podcast or others saying this whole time, like, I'm never going to retire. And it doesn't mean from Lovesack necessarily. I hope so. If they'll let me keep going, I'll keep going.
You might be doing different things.
That's right. But I don't plan on just golfing, because, there are, what good does that do the world? And look, I'm not trying to be critical. I respect people that want to just like chill out and like have a good life. But as a driven human being, I really want to hold myself to account. Another thing that I do, is I have this morning mantra. I was reflecting on it this morning before we got to get on this podcast, that when I'm at my best, I'm reciting it every day to myself. And there's all kinds of little one-liners in there that I say out loud to myself. And if I can't do it out loud, I do it silently. But things that keep me on the path I want to be on. And some of them are very tactical, like whether it's
like what?
Well, like, I mean, as tactical as 175 by August. Like I'm trying to lose 10 pounds, and I'll weave that in there. That's a temporary entrant, but a lot of it's there permanently. And I say things like, I will not just be pleasantly remembered. I will seek to inspire everyone that I can around me. I will, I say these things to myself. I will put down my phone and look in my kids' eyes. These are things I'm saying on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And it takes me about, 90 seconds to get through, but it's all kinds of these things.
Are you doing something physically at the same time?
No, but that's interesting. Tell me what you mean by that.
Just recently, I started in my exercise routine in the morning to start to incorporate these Tai Chi movements.
Okay.
And we've all seen them for years, and people out in parks doing them and everything. And so rather than just do them and count, or watch the clock, I started to, even to myself, verbalize who I am, what I'm trying to become.
Yeah. So a similar thing to what I've just described.
And it's very recent. That's what I was asking. It's a combination of things. I'm doing the movements, yes, but I'm also being deliberate to use my time effectively to verbalize, at least to myself. I have friends who are very good at verbalizing their plans, but this is just to myself in the morning. What do I want to do that day? What do I want to be, and what am I trying to become? I have a friend. His name is Emmett Keefe, and he's a friend for 20 years now. Very successful guy, and he wrote this big life plan for himself. Okay, that's one good step, but the bigger step is he tells everybody about it. And the reason he does is he says, because you can't help me to get to where I want to go unless you know where I want to go.
I love that. And by the way, for me, cognitive dissonance kicks in as a friend, not a foe, and makes me feel like a hypocrite when I'm not living up to that thing that I've told you I was going to do. So I've tried to be very public about what I'm trying to do with Lovesac, and I'm sure people roll their eyes and think whatever, just as I'm sure people in the early days.
But it helps them around you to know where you're going.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? If people didn't know about your audacious goals for Lovesac, they couldn't help you get there.
And they wouldn't bother. Because if I don't take it seriously, by the way, people can roll their eyes, but you respect that person behind the, you can get the person behind the counter who is kind of like looking at their watch and, unhappy to be there helping you check out at the burger place, fill in the blank. Or you get the person with their shirt tucked in that's super amped and they're a little bit over the top, and they may even kind of like put you off. But I think most people have some kind of respect for that person. Like, hey, this is someone who loves their job at Wendy's. And you kind of like, even if it's over the top, it's still like you have a respect for that.
Absolutely. I think you're so right.
Yeah. And so, because we live in a world where it's so cool to be disengaged, flippant, unexcited, pessimistic, sarcastic.
It's easy.
It's easy and it's cool and it's celebrated.
We go there naturally. It's the easy thing. It's so much harder. It's 10 times harder to be optimistic than it is to be pessimistic. So you have to work at it. And if you work at it long enough, it's like shyness. If you fake not being shy over a period of time, guess what? You stop being shy.
Yeah.
So you fake it till you make it.
Well, and we live in a world that will always tell you that this is who you are and you should just be who you are and celebrate who you are. And I say, we can become, we are becoming, we are meant to become. We are not just meant to be. And so, look, I'm so interested. I'm so excited. I've already ordered it. Your book, Lodestar, for those listening, Lodestar. I take the stuff down. A piece of advice, always be listening. ABL, always be listening or reading something in the self-help realm. If you haven't.
And now with audio the way it is today,
yes,
I find myself hardly ever listening to music anymore in the car.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I'm denying myself the opportunity to learn something.
It's all podcasts for me.
Stuff out there.
By the way, even novels right now, I'm taken to, I just finished Ayn Rand's Fountainhead. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Little bit of fiction in there to develop your empathy. Always a self-help book cooking.
Yes.
All kinds of different, there's just a wealth of books and podcasts. It's all for, like this podcast. It's all just free. It's out there. Here we are sitting with a billionaire, whatever, a successful, amazing leader, person, grandfather, human being, sharing with you very personal skills, tactics, tips, tricks. And it's all just free and it's out there. And that wasn't available to us 10 years ago. 20
No,
years.
I still haven't thrown out my collection of cassettes.
Yeah,
The
totally.
7 Principles cassettes, I still have them. Someday I'll but as you say, it's all out there for free now.
It's all out there. And by the way, the best stuff is you will find these common themes. Did you ever, as you were doing Lodestar or any of your work there, did you get into Maxwell Maltz? Was that ever on your, you know, the it's one of my favorite, Psycho-Cybernetics. I feel like it's the grandfather of all the self-help stuff. But
Tell us about 'em.
well, I've mentioned it a few times on the pod. It's just one of my favorite books. I keep trying to ask my daughter to read it. You know, unfortunately, I've probably, you know, overhyped it. But
I'll tell you a quick story there.
yeah,
You're not overhyping it. A lesson I learned is this is back in the cassette days. We'd be in the car with 3 kids, Mary Lou and I, 3 kids, and I'd put in my cassettes, and they'd roll their eyes, and,
yeah,
"Oh my god,
yeah,
they're not listening." They put their own headphones on or whatever it was at the time. And, one of my favorites was a fellow named Zig Ziglar,
of course, love Zig.
and, I was so fond of him, and I was asked to do a speaking tour, uh, 9 different cities, and I agreed to do it because Zig was the opening act, and it was an
Wow,
excuse for me to hang around with him.
cool.
Well, lo and behold, the tour comes to the New York area, and they're doing one event on Long Island, Nassau Coliseum, the other event at the Meadowlands in New Jersey. So I said, Zig, as long as we're going to be in town together, I'd love to have you over the house for dinner. He says, I'd love to come. So here we were, school night. In between those 2 dates, Zig would be the opening act, and he was fantastic. And I'd bring up the rear with a bunch of other folks. And I had the most wonderful dinner at home, just the 5 of us with Zig, so 6 in total, sitting around the dining room table. I mentioned a school night because my kids were still in school. But it was now 12:15. I realized we're still sitting there and the kids are still up. And they swore they never listened to the tape, but then they hang on every word of Mr. Ziegler's. And one of them is saying, Mr. Ziegler, tell us about Wilma Rudolph again. Well, they swore they weren't listening, Shawn,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they remembered all the stories and all the
yeah.
lessons. And he was it was a tingly night for me because I got to expose my kids to one of my heroes who had so much to teach and so much to give. Your daughter's listening. She may not realize it, but she's listening.
You know, uh, I, you know, I care about my daughter, and I care about all the people working at Lovesac. You know, we're doing a know yourself and know your purpose module coming up that I'll get to speak to, something that I'm really passionate about. And look, the truth is the stuff that I'm preaching should lead some of them to depart and go do their own thing, which is kind of messed up because obviously I'd love them to stay and help us at Lovesac. But like, if I'm really being honest about what I believe, I should not be selfish with it. And in fact, any human that has the ambition to do things, listen, and I don't for 1 second demean people who are not entrepreneurial and want to do their own thing. If everyone did that, I wouldn't have Lovesac couldn't exist. So I think there's an opportunity for every person. But this stuff, and look, we're just scratching the surface. A person like you and I could sit here and jam with you for 2 more hours on all this stuff, and I won't do that to you. But just I think it's worth anyone listening taking away this idea that you can. It's true what they say. You are capable of anything. It is not easy to make big things, hard things, far-reaching things happen. And if you decide to have that ambition, you both need to, I believe, you both need to evolve as a human constantly and endlessly, even through and past and beyond retirement, as Jim McCann is demonstrating, as well as be willing to embrace these easy to dismiss principles of personal development, change, evolution. You are not just who you are. It is a falsehood that society is pushing on you that you are just you, and the world should celebrate you as you are. I believe we certainly have our uniqueness, and that can be celebrated, but we can become more and more capable if we are willing to embrace these principles. And I look forward to reading Lodestar, Jim. I'm going to, ask you one way or another to be some kind of mentor in my life, even if it's just through your book. I'm grateful to have met you. Is there any last piece of advice you can offer, in the spirit of let me save you 25 years, anything you would offer to someone to save them a chunk off their own 25-year journey?
Well, listening to your kind words and your own reflections, Shawn, the term that came to mind just listening to you now is we are all becoming. So we can say we're evolving, we're changing, we're becoming. We're all becoming something.
Yep.
And in your life, I sense I'm a very different person than I was 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago. Very different. I'm more and more proud every day of who the person I'm becoming is, and maybe not so proud of who I was. But we're all changing and evolving. I'll use the word becoming for this moment. We can choose to be deliberate about that, cognizant of it, and have a productive guiding force on what we're becoming. Or we can be lazy and understand that 80% of what we'll do is negative to ourselves and those around us if we're not being proactive, positive, and deliberate about what we're becoming. So we can choose the inputs, that great piece of fiction, that great how-to book, that great group of people you choose to be around, the queries you choose to ask, the things you choose to get involved in, or you can just let it happen to you. And if it just happens to you, it's not necessarily good. It's going to be 80% bad. So be deliberate and have some voice and some influence on what you're becoming.
Become by default or become by design. Well said. You can follow Jim McCann, as I do on LinkedIn, on Twitter, at Jim1800Flowers. You can become a super user of 1-800-Flowers like me, and it will improve your relationships on Earth. Check out Jim's wonderful organization, Smile Farms, at smilefarms.org. We didn't have time to get into it, but he's doing some amazing things for the disabled community. And be sure to treat yourself to Jim's book, Lodestar, Lodestar, Tapping into the 10 Pillars of Success. It's available everywhere. To the charitable chairman, the friendly philanthropist, the blooming billion-dollar idea man himself, Jim McCann, thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. You are good.
And remember, manifesting in business or life is not magic. It is not a joke. It is clarity with a deadline. So see it, believe it, do it. It just might save you a chunk off your own 25 years, your journey. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Shawn.
Once a year to take my friends away should not be the budget for your bike across America.
TikTok has become an aggregator for some of the dumbest human actions.
When I won that million, I was $2 million in debt, barely hanging on.